Probably the least understood and most controversial figure in our known history is Jesus Christ, or Jesus, who the Christian church was founded upon. And I think, though, that his message, which for many of us seems, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it may, some people question whether this message was really recorded right by the church. And I think there's one simple way to clear this up. It's in his tone of voice and in who he was talking about when he said I and me, and also when he supposedly referred to himself as the Son of Man repeatedly as recorded in the Bible. To better understand a master, it's good for us to look at masters from other societies, Buddha, Krishna, and even gurus today who are, because they're all teaching the same message. They're teaching about the self and the present moment. Become conscious in the present moment. This is the teaching of a master, that we start out as in a programmed way. We're programmed by our surroundings, and then we step out of that. Carl Jung, the psychologist, he called that individuation, where the animal steps out of its role as hunter-gatherer or whatever and starts to think and reflect on things. This shows up in the Old Testament, in Genesis, with the Adam and Eve story. Adam is the first man. Well, any thinking person knows that the first man didn't come along and seed the Jewish population. But if you look at it from literature, this is, again, is the individuation process, where Adam is the first man, no longer among men, no longer with the herd. The first individual, the first identity, the first one who recognizes there's such a thing as right and wrong, who has a God, which is a set of moral values. And here we get to what Jesus meant when he said, follow me. So a master isn't going to tell you to follow me. That's the lower man who wants to build his power base. The master will say, follow me, meaning the self. So you don't follow, you follow the higher self. You don't follow a man. And that was actually against Jewish teachings, against it was against Jewish law, was to follow a man, only follow God. So when he's talking about me or I am the way, he doesn't mean he is the way. He means the self, which you could substitute the term God, the self. The self is the way. God is the way. So when he says I, and he made this clear, he says I'm speaking, even though we don't have his tonal, we don't know how he quite said it. He does say that he was speaking as God, not as himself. So he is saying, I'm saying the self when he says, follow me. At the Passover supper, that's called the Last Supper, he said, this is my blood, and poured the wine, this is my body, and broke the bread. He's not saying this is my body. He's saying this, the body is the self, is the body. So this is my blood, is it extends your body out of your flesh, and so you're to celebrate the your surroundings. You celebrate the activity that God has given you, or that we create ourselves under an umbrella of nature. So if you look at it that way, then we have a very different teaching than what the church understands. The church wasn't trying to hide that. The church just simply didn't understand it. It was an elevated teaching. And the Christian church was founded by bishops or Christian leaders who were had a good relationship with the Roman Emperor. So there were the establishment. So the establishment Christians created the Bible, and the ones who believed in the mystic, spiritual, the truer aspects, we call them the Gnostics, and they were called heretical. They had to bury their they had to get rid of their text, and we found some of them recently. And their message was more along that line, although there's various different ideas, even some controversy with the Gnostic text. So now we get into, with that decided, or with that understanding, that he's speaking of the self. He's not trying to build a power base. He's not going to come and judge the earth. When he talks about the Son of Man, now the church says he's talking about himself. But that's just what the church says. There's no reason to believe it otherwise. He says the Son of Man, when the Son of Man comes, he will be treated badly. He'll be brought before the authorities, and he'll be crucified, the whole story. And every time, he's never once says, I will be crucified, or I will be brought before the authority. He says the Son of Man, as recorded in the Gospels. So it's you have to start to realize he is not really talking about himself. He can't be, because a master isn't going to have himself crucified. It's really a bad role model. It's a bad role model. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He who lives by martyrdom accomplishes it, becomes a martyr. So we really have to consider he was talking about a false Messiah, or a man who wanted to be king, and then this man, there's a blueprint in the Seth material by Jane Roberts, which gives an account of this being in a psychic event. A false man was we can presume was fingered by presumably by Judas to protect Jesus. This is in the Seth material, books that were popular in the 1980s, and he probably, when this false Messiah turned over the table to the money changers, I don't think a master would have done that either. Then that leads to his arrest, and he's executed. So whether Jesus was prophesizing this, knowing it would happen, or that was added after the event, added later, it was believed that Jesus was crucified, I think there's more reason than not to believe that it was another man crucified. It wasn't Jesus. The Quran says that. In fact, there's a couple lines in the Quran that say exactly that it was another man crucified. And that clears up a whole lot of problems. And now the Son of Man, now that he's not Jesus, he's a human being, it turns other phrases around. For example, in I think it's in Luke, there's the famous phrase, birds have nests and foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest or nowhere to lay his head. And so that's assumed that Jesus has no place to rest on the earth. So would the master have no place to rest? Again, he also says, come to me and I will give you rest. So that they contradict each other. In fact, when he says the foxes have dens and birds have nests, he's actually answering a man who says, I will follow you. He's a man saying, I will follow you. And he says, well, like he's saying, yes, follow me and I'll give you no rest. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that same passage shows up in a Gnostic text found in 1945, which was used by followers of Jesus, but rejected by the church that was close to Emperor Constantine. And in that, it's exact same phrase, slight differences. But the translators in this one, Marvin Meyer and Stephen Patterson, two very respected scholars in the field, they substituted for Son of Man, they substituted human being. So that one reads that foxes have dens and birds have nests, but human beings have nowhere to rest. Now, in answering a man who says, I will follow you, now it makes perfect sense. He will follow Jesus, and Jesus says, yes, you have no place to rest. And then in another line, soon he says, come to me. And to me means, again, the self. Come to me, to the self. And I, the self, will give you rest. And Buddhists and Hindus learn this through meditation. They find rest through meditation by coming to enter the self. So that seems pretty clear with just those changes. When you read the Bible, you have a very different Bible. Elaine Pagels, who is an expert on Gnosticism and a Christian scholar, she said that if the Gospel of Thomas had been included in the New Testament, the other Gospels would have been read very differently. Because the mystical side is in those Gospels, but it's just kind of put down. If the eye is clear, the whole body will be full of light. He didn't say the eyes are clear, he says the eye is clear. Well, that's the inner eye. Again, this is the I, myself, I. Well, the I is the source of all of the five physical senses. I think I'll conclude here with that, and take this up again another time. Thank you.